joining me. I'm going to try to read this chapter 15 for you tonight. My asthma's been acting up a little, so bear with me. I'm going to do my best to get through it. So, a sleepless night for Bulger and me, and what followed it. Interview with King Geldas. My request and his reply. What all took place when I learned that the king and his counselors had decided not to grant my request. Strange tumult among the Culticorps, and how his frigid majesty stilled it, and some other things. Not only had I been unable to sleep, excuse me, but by my tossing about, I'd kept poor dear Bulger awake so that when morning came, we both looked haggard enough. I felt as if I'd been through a fit of sickness, and no doubt he did too. At any rate, I had no appetite for the heavy meat diet of the Culticorps, and seeing me refuse my breakfast, Bulger did likewise. I promised Shenobel to come early to the palace, for she had a number of questions which she wished to ask me concerning the upper world. "Good morning, little Baron," she cried in her sweetest tones as I entered the throne room. "Didst thou sleep well last night on the new pelt which Papa sent thee?" I was about to make a reply when Shenobel's hand, coming in contact with mine, for we had both removed our gloves in order to shake hands, she uttered a piercing scream, and drawing back, stood there, blowing her breath on her right palm, as she exclaimed again and again, "Firebrand! Firebrand!" In an instant, King Geldas and a group of his counselors drew near, and pulling over their gloves, one after the other laid his hand in mine. "Glowing coals!" cried his frigid majesty. "Tongue of flame!" roared Frosty Fizz. "Boiling water!" groaned Glacier Hoy. "Red hot!" hissed Icicle. "Thou must leave the palace at once," half pleaded King Geldas. "It would simply be madness for me to permit such a firebrand to remain within the walls of the royal residence. The intense heat of thy body would be sure to melt a hole in its walls ere the sun goes down." The royal counselors again drew off their gloves and laid hands upon poor Bulger, when a second alarm, even wilder than the first, was sent up, and we were hastily escorted back to our lodging-house. No doubt, dear friends, you will be somewhat mystified upon reading these words, but the explanation is easy. Owing to worriment and lack of sleep, Bulger and I had awakened in a highly feverish condition, and to the Culticorps we had really seemed to be almost on fire. But our fever left us toward night, hearing which King Geldas sent for us and did all in his power to entertain us with song and dance, in both of which Shenobel was very skilled. Finding that his frigid majesty was in such a rosy humor, if I may be allowed to speak that way of a person whose face was almost as white as the alabaster lamps over his head, I determined to ask him for permission to cleave asunder the icy cell of the little man with the frozen smile, and ascertain, if possible, from the collar, which made up his apparently of gold and silver coin, was clasped around his neck, to whom he had belonged and where his home had been. No sooner had I proffered my request than I noticed the white face of the royal Geldas parted with its smile, and took on a terribly icy look. Methought I could look through the tip of his nose as though an icicle, and methought, too, that his ears shone in the light of the alabaster lamps, like sheets of crystal ice, and that his voice as he spoke puffed into my face like the first flakes of a coming snowstorm. I quickly repented of my rash action, but it was too late, and I determined to stand by it. "Little Baron," spoke Royal Geldus in icy tones, "never a heart beat in the kingly breast that was purer and colder than mine, freer from warmth of selfishness, with not a single hot corner for ire or anger to nestle in, or for weakness or folly to make their hiding places. For thousands of years my people have inhabited this icy domain and breathed this pure cold air, and never yet hath one desired to strike an axe of flint into the walls of the crystal prison. That crystal prison. However, little Baron, there may be some warm corner in my heart, wherein cold and limpid wisdom may not be at home. Therefore come to me tomorrow for my answer. Meanwhile, I will take counsel with the coolest brains and the coldest hearts about me. If they see no harm in thy request, thou mayest crack open the crystal gates that have for so many centuries shut the man-like creature in his silent cell, and take him forth in order to study the mystic words graven on his collar, but upon the strict condition that in cleaving open his house of crystal, my quarrymen so apply their wedges of flint as to break the block into 2 equal pieces, that when thou dost read what may be there, the 2 parts be closed upon the little man again, edge fitting edge, like a perfect mold, so exactly that to the eye no sign of line or joint be visible. Dost promise, little Baron, that this shall be as to our royal will? It seems meet that it should be." I promised, most solemnly, that the crystal cell of the little man with the frozen smile should be opened and closed, exactly as its frigid majesty had directed. It would be hard for me to tell you, dear friends, how happy I went to the rest of the night upon my icy divan, and how, as the tiny flame of my alabaster lamp shed its soft glow upon the walls of ice, I lay there turning over in my mind the strange and mysterious pleasure which was soon to fall to my lot when the quarrymen of King Geldus should set their wedges of flint in this glorious block of ice and cleave asunder. Even Don Thumb, the master of masters, who had never dreamed of receiving a message from the people who lived in the very childhood of the world, and in anticipation already I enjoyed the splendid triumph which would be mine when I came to the lecture before learned societies upon the mysterious lettering on the curious collar clasping the neck of the little man with the frozen smile. Imagine my anguish, then, dear friends, upon receiving a message from King Geldus the next day that his counselors had with one voice decreed against the opening of the crystal prison which stood in Shenandoah's grotto. I was as if smitten with some sudden awful ailment. I had never felt it until that moment, how keen the tooth of disappointment could be. I shivered first with a chill that made me brother to the quality corpse, and then I burned with a fever so raging that a wild rumor spread through Geldus' icy domain that I was setting fire to the very walls and roof. With wild outcries and faces drawn with nameless dread, the subjects of his frigid majesty rushed pell-mell up the wide flights of stairs leading to the palace of ice, and pleaded for the king to show himself. In cold and frigid majesty, Geldus walked out upon the platform and listened to the prayers of his people. "We shall burn," they cried. "Our beautiful homes will fall about our ears. These crystal steps will melt away, and all these fair columns and arches and statues and pedestals will turn to water and empty themselves into the lowest caverns of the earth. The great window of our sky will fall with awful crash upon our heads, putting an end forever to this fair domain of crystal splendor. O Geldus, haste thee, ere it be too late. Let the little baron have his way before bitter disappointment transforms his body and limbs into tongues of flame, to lick up this magnificent palace into a single night and dash its 1,000 alabaster lamps to the ground, a heap of shards, no fragment matching its brother fragment, but all a wretched mass of worthless matter." King Geldus and his frosty counselors saw that it would be useless to attempt to reason with the people, and therefore, turning toward them, he coldly waved his chilly hand, and with an icy smile spoke frostily as follows: "Go, quality corpse, to your homes, and be happy. What think you I, a hated brain, doth my heart steam with foolishness, that you should think me capable of wishing harm to the tiniest quality corp that spins his top of ice in my fair kingdom? Go to your homes. I say, the little baron is already cooling off, for he hath my full consent to cleave asunder the crystal prison of the little man, with the frozen smile. There is nothing to be frightened about, my children, so eat hearty suppers, and sleep soundly tonight. For my royal word for it, by tomorrow morning the little baron will cease to be the least bit dangerous. To all the peace and welfare of our icy kingdom, a good night, a cold good night to you all." In a short half hour, the panic-stricken culty corpse were all back in their homes again. And when a messenger came from King Geldus to measure my temperature, he found such a great improvement that he opened his chilly heart and sent me a beautiful present from his treasure house, to wit, a small block of ice, clearer than any gem I'd ever seen, in the heart of which lay a glorious red rose in fullest bloom. Each velvet petal opened out eagerly. Upon consulting my diary, I found that it was just 6 months to the day since I had left Castle Trump, and the loved one sheltered by its time-worn tiles, and cold as was the covering of this thrice beautiful child of the upper world, I clasped it to my breast and shed tears. And this was the way it came about, dear friends, that King Geldus and his frosty counselors were brought to give their consent to my cleaving asunder the icy prison wherein lay the little man with the frozen smile. Well, thank you for bearing with me with my asthma. I am going to come back, finish this up. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.